Sage Steele worked at ESPN as an anchor, as a host, for almost 17 years, and she was good at her job. That's why she stayed so long. But there was one problem. Sage Steele decided to say what she really thinks in a pretty gentle, measured way. But still, for example, in 2021, she went on a podcast and hammered ESPN for its vaccine mandate, called it sick and scary, which it was. On that same podcast, she committed a real sin, and she asked an obvious question. Why does Barack Obama call himself black when he's actually biracial? He's as white as he is black. Well, you can't say that, it turns out. ESPN pulled her off the air for 10 days. Why? Interesting question. Then Steele made ESPN even madder when she said that the man in the bathing suit, Leah Thomas, who was winning all the swimming competitions, was not, in fact, a female swimmer. So behind the scenes, ESPN said you'd better be quiet about the trans issues. In fact, sent her a letter saying it's totally fine to talk about trans issues as long as you don't misgender someone. In other words, you can disagree as long as you don't disagree with the people you're arguing with. You have to accept the terms of the trans activists you're criticizing, or else you're a thought criminal. Watch this.
There was a special, an ESPN special that came out showcasing, Women's History Month. And the special was surrounding Leah Thomas. And I just remember thinking to myself, I could not imagine being a woman working there, being asked to report on this issue with a smile on my face and doing it. And so I just kind of wanted to ask about the support you felt from women since, of course, taking the stance that you have.
None. None. I was asked to stop tweeting about it. I was asked to stop saying anything about it on social media because I was offending others at the company.
None, absolutely none. But she does have good people around her because she herself is a good person. She's gone from ESPN. She settled a lawsuit with them. And now Sage Steele joins us in the studio. Sage Steele, it is such an honor to have you here. Thank you.
This is my honor. Thank you.
What a great response. Tell us about the support you've received from women. None. Absolutely none. Is that true?
Women supporting women. You know how it goes.
I do know how it goes.
I know. And I will say throughout my career, I think that's the overall most disappointing thing is that, and especially in the sports world where when I started, like dinosaur years, no internet, I was always the only woman in the locker rooms, etc.
I bet.
The most support I received was definitely from my male peers.
Because they like women.
Well, no, it wasn't like that. And I was married.
No, I don't mean in a creepy way. It's just that they're just, no, I don't mean that. Actually, I didn't mean it in a sexual way. It's just like men are kind of programmed to have affection for women. I mean, they just are.
But I also think they weren't threatened by me, especially early on in my career. But even at ESPN, I was excited because where I was before in DC, I was the only mother. So I was excited to be around women who were a little bit older and could maybe, part of the club and take care of each other as a mother, first and foremost. Forget about, the broadcast, because that is competitive. So I think, the big picture is women preach this all the time. And it's like, oh, the men holding us down in the glass ceiling. And every time I speak publicly at an event or whatever, I make sure I bring this up because I'm very passionate about it as the mother of two girls.
Yes.
And they're, college age kids too. But, we complain about the guys, but look in the mirror. What do we do to each other first and foremost?
Well, I've seen it a lot. I've had a lot of female bosses, a lot. And every single one of them has been nice to me. I'm just being honest. I mean, some were good, some were not good. Most were not that great, but some were fine. They're always nice to me. Always nice. They were savage to the women on staff. And I always noticed that. They're mean to the women.
Yeah.
Like, what is that?
They pit us against each other. They really do, which, again, is just unfortunate. But to me, okay, fine, own that if you don't like the other women. But then to be hypocritical and go on social media and talk about let's uplift each other. And listen, I wasn't trying to call people out, but over the last 8 months, maybe probably a year, when I started to support Riley Gaines and certainly the whole transgender sports issue, I said, women, we don't realize our power. If we as women in the media, let's just say women in sports media, because this is a sports issue, came together to say, no, we've been fighting for so long for women in sports and for salaries to be equal at times. You look at the women's national soccer team versus the men and the ratings they brought in versus the men. There are some things, like we are fighting for women. And then to be silent when it comes here. Like ESPNW is part of the ESPN network. That W is for women. They spend millions of dollars on a big summit, like a get together of women every
Yes.
single year. And on the stage, it's women and promoting women and promoting diverse thought with women and supporting them. So then when the biggest issue really of the last, I don't know, several decades comes up, after all the Title IX fights, we as sports media, women remain silent. To me, the hypocrisy was too thick to ignore.
Oh,
Yeah.
And silent in a kind of North Korean way, like nobody's allowed to disagree even a little bit.
No. And then I found out, more from my employer, like, zip it. And so I made sure that night when I received that email, which was, wow, I'm in the middle of a free speech lawsuit against that company. I made sure and sent another email because are you going to tell me to not support women? Like,
this is like the most Orwellian sentence. I alluded to it in the intro, but here it is. While civil discourse on the issue of transgender athletes competing in women's sports is both appropriate and beneficial, that discourse needs to be fact-based and should not rely on personal attacks, insults, derogatory or crude language, or misgendering others. So you can disagree as long as you accept their premise.
As long as you follow the narrative. And listen, I knew that, but to me this was simple and it was a no-brainer.
But
they
put that in writing. That's real, right?
In writing. And then it continued, and you might offend people at our company who are in the LGBTQ community by what? By supporting women? Because there's a difference between attacking the transgender community and supporting women. I have never and would never do that. That's not my heart, because I have empathy for transgender people who want to compete.
Well, of course.
But the answer is not to take from the women that for over 50 years, Billie Jean King, Title IX.
Sure.
This is not the answer. And I had no idea that would be controversial to stand up for women.
Isn't one of my female relative of mine said to me the other day, I thought was kind of brilliant, like the whole trans thing really is just another triumph of men over women. Does anybody ever say that?
I have heard that more recently. It's amazing how many DMs I get and emails through website or whatever from people, even in the industry, who are like, I wish I could. So thank you. And I'm like, oh, we all can.
Yes.
I do understand why they don't. I mean, listen, I'm a prime example of what happens when you speak up and are yourself. You get canceled. I mean, hey, you know all about that.
Yeah.
Right. So, but there's a point in everyone's lives where you have decisions to make. For me, it's so much. This is so much bigger than me. Who am I? I'm in my 50s. I'm not playing sports. I'm trying to do Peloton once a week. There's a big difference between me and these young women like Riley Gaines, or my niece, who's a good softball player, a good volleyball player. So for me, it's about kids and speaking up for parents who might have that fear, especially to hang on to their job because they might get an email like I did. So if I don't use this to stand up for these parents and young girls, then shame on me. That's kind of the way. I agree.
And also, how can you respect yourself? How can you sleep soundly?
Yeah.
How can you have dignity if you're reading someone else's script? You can't. So what, just give us a synopsis of your life. You said off camera that you'd grown up all around because you're from a military family. Yes. How did you get to ESPN?
Oh gosh, quite the.
I bet.
Army brat. So when people say where you're from, like I need, you'd think at this point I'd come up with a better answer. Everywhere.
Yes.
And by the time I was 11, I lived in 4 different countries.
Wow.
At the time, spoke a couple languages, but now let's stick with English. Let's stray off the
One's
reservation
enough.
there. Yeah. And then went to Indiana University. I'm a Hoosier. Took all 5 years. And then I think they were like, just take this diploma and leave, please. Like, you're embarrassing us. Just go away. Got the piece of paper. And then, listen, ESPN was always my goal, always my dream.
Wow.
I was 11 when I announced at the dinner table to my parents that I wanted to be a sportscaster. And I was this super shy girl. I think all the moving, just throughout my whole life, probably made me extra shy. But it also, I think, subconsciously taught me that if you want to have friends on the kickball court, at recess, certainly then into corporate America, like, you have to go make that happen.
Yes.
So when I said I wanted to be a sportscaster, my dad and mom were like, okay. And this is 1984. There were no women doing this when I was 11, 12 years old.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, you're gonna have to talk if you want to be on TV. So they had to really push me out of my comfort zone and push through that fear of being unliked, disliked if I unliked is not a word. See, English language. Disliked if I'm myself, and that's why I was just shy. And as a biracial young woman, my mom's white, Irish Italian, my dad's black. You felt different. You were not enough for here and not enough for this side either. Right. So there's a lot of confusion. So I look back and I'm grateful for being really uncomfortable and having great parents to push me through those times when I had this dream, but they were like, you're going to have to work extra hard to get there.
So did you wind up in a lot of places before ESPN?
Yes. South Bend, Indiana, first one, CBS affiliate in South Bend, and then to Indianapolis. So at like 22, it was a top 25 market. You know, I was completely in over my head, and the first woman doing sports in that city. And we have NBA and NFL and all the college. And so 3-man sports department, I was definitely number 4 out of 3, like number 8 out of 3. But that's where there were certainly some experiences where it was obvious that they didn't want me there. They weren't quite ready. I knew I wasn't ready, but I also, would you turn down an opportunity? No, you take it. Yeah. And then you are humble, lead with humility, and ask everybody around you, lead with kindness. Just like growing up as a kid, if you wanted friends when you kept moving across the world, you're kind and you lead with that.
Of course.
Yeah. So Indy, and then to Tampa, and then to DC, Baltimore, Comcast Sportsnet for 6 years. And actually, this is funny, and then I'll shut up. I got my first offer from ESPN in 2004 and turned it down. I was pregnant with my second child and knew I wanted at least one more. And I had a friend, the late, great Stuart Scott, God rest his soul, he died of cancer 9 years ago. And he was everything at ESPN. Yeah. And he was like, listen, I love you. We had the same agent. He's like, you need to be ready to go there. And as a young mother, still trying to have more kids, you'll get eaten alive. Yeah. Especially back then in early 2000s. It was a very different place. So I really took a chance and was scared. And even my agent, everybody said, you're nuts. ESPN doesn't need you. You need them. And if you turn this down, you're going to be blackballed. And I raised that family's everything. And when you move across the world, and I have 2 younger brothers, it was the 5 of us. Yes. So I knew that if I didn't follow through with that core principle in my family, as a mother myself, that I'm a hypocrite. So turned it down and took a chance that they'd call me back.
Aren't you glad you did?
I'm so glad. But I think I didn't look at it as a bigger picture thing. It was just what I felt I had to do at that moment.
Young people
in hindsight, it was I believe in myself thing and a faith in God where if this was meant to be, then I would get another chance. But either way, I have my babies and I will never regret.
Well, exactly. That. I've met a lot of people who regret a lot of things, tattoos, jobs, sexual encounters. I've never met anybody who regrets a child, not one.
Yeah. And that's what I say. So many, mothers will say, gosh, we're just not sure. I'm like, are you asking my opinion? If you're not sure, to me, that's your answer.
Exactly.
You'll never regret,
having another child.
But you might if you don't.
I completely agree.
So I'm grateful for that time and for taking a chance and then going and to be able to live out that dream that I had when I was a little girl. How many people actually get to do exactly what they set out to do when they were 11 at that network? It's a blessing.
Amen. And in the end, you learn, I think it's fair to say, whatever TV network you work for, whatever company you work for, they don't really care about you.
No.
Your children care about you and always will.
Even if they hate us half the
time. Yeah, right. Well, it's a phase. Thanks for watching our conversation with Sage Steele. Politics is so corrupt and so deceptive right now. It's really hard to know who to trust, especially in Washington. And in the capital city, very few are holding the powerful accountable. Almost nobody. But the Heritage Foundation is. Heritage has been around for about 50 years, but it seems newly energized. And as proof of that, the president of Heritage, Kevin Roberts, recently went to Davos, Switzerland, with all the powerful people. But he didn't go to bend a knee to Klaus Schwab. No. He went to tell them to their faces how awful they are. Here's what he said.
I'll be candid here because I think I've been invited here to be candid. Elites tell us that open borders and even illegal immigration are okay. The average person tells us in the United States that both rob them of the American way of life. Elites also tell us that public safety isn't a problem in big American cities. just travel to New York or Washington or Dallas, Texas. The average person will tell you that the lack of public safety damages not just the American way of life, but their life.
Well, amen. If you want to know more about Heritage, go to heritage.org/Tucker. We recommend you do. So what, was ESPN political when you got there?
No.
Right. That's what I thought.
No. And it's interesting. How long do you do that for?
Quite a while.
I, look back and you realize, gosh, we were kind of inching closer and closer.
Yeah.
And then especially when Trump won in 2016,
yes.
Then it was like, just, wow. I remember talking to my bosses and this 2016, 2017 and saying, what are we doing? And why are we allowing this? Michael Jordan said it in the 80s. Republicans buy sneakers too. And because he was criticized, as Tiger Woods has been criticized for not being vocal enough for the Black community.
Of course.
Politically. And to me, they're smart businessmen who said,
yeah.
no, I want everybody. So I would use that example to my bosses at my sports network. Like, don't we want everybody to watch ESPN? Why divide? I believe if people want politics, they can go to CNN, they can go to Fox News.
Of course.
They came to us as a respite and as an escape.
Exactly.
And so why? And then that president was ousted, a little drama, and then the new president came in, and I think it was 2017, Jimmy Pitaro, and he agreed, and it was great. And he kind of drew the line in the sand, like, we're not doing this. We want everybody to watch. And then the pandemic hit, and then George Floyd happened, and it's been a mess since.
So your read is that the president of ESPN was really trying to just be a sports channel, but he was overwhelmed by
the current president. Yes. And then listen, who are we owned by?
Well, good point.
Disney.
Yeah, a very political, very left-wing company.
Yes.
So I just got to go back to what we said in the intro about your interview about Barack Obama on a podcast. I find that really interesting and very confusing. Can you explain what you said and what you meant?
Yes, gladly. It was with Jay Cutler, the former Bears quarterback, and he had a really good research staff who picked out a couple of topics that I had spoken on in the past, and it was actually a story from 2014. I didn't bring up Barack Obama.
Yeah.
Barbara Walters brought up Barack Obama when I was on The View in 2014 when Obama was still president. And Barbara in particular, wanted to talk about why I chose to identify as biracial. Like, identify? Well, I am. I don't know why this is controversial.
Why are you choosing to acknowledge reality?
Yeah. And so, but I said, absolutely, bring it up. And so we're live on The View, ABC. We're all the same
company,
same family, and said, well, why do you choose to say you're biracial? And I said, and she goes, Barack Obama doesn't. And I said, okay. I said, I think it's interesting for the president to, completely forget about the fact or ignore the fact that he was raised by his white mother and white grandmother, and his Black father was nowhere to be found. Now, that wasn't breaking news. He wrote a book about that.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not criticizing. I'm saying these are the facts. So to me, it was interesting that he chose to completely ignore his white side and identify as Black. My personal opinion, which I've never really said publicly, is, okay, this was planned. This was political. Everyone knew what they were doing when he's coming up through Chicago. They had a plan for Obama for many, many, many years. But I did say, you do you, I'm going to do me. And I don't know. I'm pretty sure my white mother was there the day I was born. I mean, again,
in the vicinity anyway.
On a limb there. And I said, but I'm so proud. I'm so proud to have been raised in this beautifully diverse family where my white family loves me as much as my Black family.
Yes.
Isn't that what we want? And so to me, that wasn't controversial, but I will never ignore my mother. And so that got me in trouble. So she brought up Obama in 2014. And so fast forward to 2021, this podcast.
So can I just ask, did people respond negatively to you saying that?
Yes, there definitely was some negativity, and Barbara went, And listen, she's not here to,
Right.
it's nothing personal, but these are just the facts of what happened and then what led to the 2021. Yeah, there were several people in 2014. Twitter, I don't think was what it is now, X,
Right.
and certainly how crazy it's gotten. But I did get some, listen, throughout my life, the most criticism I've received, especially since probably 2016, 2017, when I've given opinions on things, the most criticism I've received is unfortunately from people who look like me. From the Black community. And so the criticism that day in 2014 was, well, she's a sellout and look at her white husband and you know, all of these things. And so that used to break me. That used to really devastate me because
Wow.
when you're a biracial kid growing up and you're, you know, you kind of are told you have to choose sides. And I never did. My parents gave me that strength despite the shyness to say, no, this is who I am. And why is that bad? Not knowing that 30 years later, this would be such a controversial thing. But, you know, so I was just recapping that story in 2021 and reiterated it. And then that me describing what happened with Barbara Walters turned into, in 2021, Sage Steele hates Black people and thinks Barack Obama should not identify as Black. And I said, no, like,
Hates Black people.
oh,
Your dad's Black.
you can't make it up. You can't make it up. So, but that when I got suspended by ESPN, they did bring that up to me, like, why are you talking about Obama? And what do you mean? And so, you know,
Wait,
I would
so
love
you're not
to
allowed to talk about Obama?
not if you don't follow the narrative. If I had said, listen, I grew up in a biracial household, but I'm a Black woman, I would probably still have a job.
But can I just think it's, maybe I'm overthinking or perhaps underthinking it, but it does seem very strange. Like, I thought the whole point of the melting pot idea was that we're all people inside, and that the left is certainly not against people of different races getting together and having children. I mean, I don't think they're against that, are
Right.
they? They don't seem to be. So why would they get mad if you say I'm the product of mixed race marriage? I just think it's like the craziest thing I've ever heard.
You know, that one drop rule we've heard
Yeah.
about for years, which I guess I just don't care enough.
Right. I agree. I agree with that,
mean,
actually.
Like, whatever, I'm 50-50.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of both, you know, and to me, with where we are today, where DEI and diversity and inclusion and, you know, all of the things, acceptance and tolerance, don't I kind of define that?
Yeah, I would think so.
You know, and so I've been so confused by it. But, and this is a discussion I hope to have on many levels as my career takes different turns now, and just to be able to have a conversation. But the hypocrisy in this whole topic, I represent diversity in America. I'm so grateful that my parents 52 years ago, coming off the civil rights era, chose to choose love over divisiveness.
Right.
My mother's parents disowned her for marrying a Black man. She had to choose between her family and the man that she loved, that loved her. This didn't matter. And so I look at my parents, 52 years, and I'm like, you know what? You guys can keep all your hatred.
Oh, your parents are still.
Oh, yes. They're alive and well, some health issues, and 52 years.
They've been married 52 years.
Yes. That's
great.
and as a biracial couple, despite some very difficult times within the family because of the differences, you know? So I look at them and I'm like, okay, I can kind of handle anything, but it is completely hypocritical in my mind for the Black community to draw this line, you know? And because I don't say Black and I say biracial, I'm a sellout. I'm a coon. I am names I can't say on TV. And Tucker, I used to be quiet about it.
You've gotten that from people directly?
I've received death threats from people who look like me because I don't identify the way they want me to.
They got on Tiger Woods about this, I remember.
Correct.
And I didn't really understand the dynamic there either. Like, why are you against Tiger Woods? Like, what?
I never understood this. I never understood this. To me, I just feel like so blessed to be able to represent that diversity that I think makes America great, you know. But I do think this, because now, fine, I've been canceled 100 times. I don't care anymore. That's
Right.
the cool thing. I have to keep speaking out about this and all of these things that have gotten me in trouble, because it is bigger than me. And every time I've spoken at a college or university, I just came from a women's skincare conference. Everywhere I go, this topic comes up because I've been in the news for it. But there are a bunch of biracial kids out there who are being told that they're not enough, who are being told to ignore their white mother or white father or Asian mother or father. And I know what that feels like. And I've been hung, publicly and canceled for not identifying the way that others want me to. So if I don't speak up because I now don't care about what comes at me, then what about these kids? So I had a woman the other day at this conference come up to me, a white woman in tears who's married to a black man and has 2 kids who are being told right now, they're like 8 and 11, who are being told, well, what your mom, no.
Disown your white mother.
Yes, at a young age. And she was in tears. And I just hugged her because I was like, stand tall. Let me talk to your kids. Like, I will do anything to help parents and kids of any age. I'm 51. Like, I'll talk to who is being told that they're not enough because they don't identify how the left and the black community, and not all areas, but in many, says that we have to identify. It's BS. It's actually racist.
Yeah.
It's wrong. And so I feel so obligated and excited to tackle this for others who are told that they're not enough.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild to me that I'll just say the last time, but I just can't help but say it. At the exact moment we're like, no, embrace your identity, be who you are. These are inborn qualities. No one can. It's like attacking people for stating their identity clearly. It's insane to me.
It's heartbreaking. And I'll be quiet. I was at a conference once, and I have to share this because I think you'll find it fascinating. We've heard this quite often, but a wonderful young woman, a motivational speaker, she's white. They're predominantly black people at the conference, and I was the moderator. And she said, she got on stage and she said, I just need to apologize. And I said, for what? She goes, I need to apologize for all white people because we can never understand. And it was a moment, Tucker.
Settle down, honey.
But yeah. I was like, okay. Yes, among other things I was thinking. But this is 2017, 16,
yeah.
17.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I just thought, oh boy, is this, I'm the moderator. I need to stay out of this. No, I have a unique perspective, I guess, because I'm biracial. And I said, no offense. I think you meant well because I know your heart. But I'm going to tell you, I'm offended that you are telling me that my white mother should apologize.
Exactly.
I mean, have you seen me? Have you seen my mother? Have you seen who she married? So when you lump white people together saying you should all apologize, for what? What did you do?
I couldn't agree more.
Tucker, what have you done? You should be apologizing right now. To me. I swear to God.
So how was that received when you said that?
Muffled claps.
Muffled claps.
Because people are afraid. But afterwards, for almost an hour and a half, there was a line of people, a lot of biracial people, a lot of white mothers, white fathers, black as well, who agree with me and said, thank you. A couple kids were crying.
Yeah.
So the less fearful I've gotten, the more I realize that I have to talk about this because we're actually so blessed to have grown up in that environment.
Yes, and whenever you tell the truth about anything, especially the hard ones, it offends people and enrages them, and they plot violence against you in some cases. But other people are thrilled and inspired and joyful just to hear something that's true.
I think there's a lot more positive.
I agree.
I really do. But the negative is what comes through on social media. But there's a lot more sanity.
Agree. So after this happened, after the fabled Obama interview, like, what did you think your status at ESPN was? If they're going to get mad at you for that, like, that's a problem.
Well, the number one thing at that time, because it kept changing, that they said they were upset about was my comments about the vaccine mandate. That was the number one thing that got me in trouble.
Did they tell you that it's not your body or choice, or do they just kind of move? Because they had been telling us it was our body or choice.
Clearly,
I remember that.
They've been saying.
Did anyone officially announce that to you, or is it just assumed that was no longer a principle?
It's literally you have until September 30th, 2021 to get a vaccine, or you're no longer employed.
Whoa.
And I waited till the very last possible day to make the decision, because then it had to be in you for 2 weeks, I think it was, in order to be fully vaccinated. And so I was close to walking.
Yeah.
Because and this is 2+ years ago. At the time, I just wanted more information.
Of course.
That's
me
it.
Too. Yeah.
And I'm like, can you give it 6 months? Because I am no scientist. I'm not a political analyst. I'm a sportscaster, and I'm a mother, and I'm just trying to do the best thing for me and for my kids. And I just did a little homework, and it's like, wait, isn't on average, isn't it 6 to 9 years for the FDA to approve any vaccine? Like, can we just slow down? Can you give me 6 months? Like, I don't know, an exception. I won't tell anybody. I'm just afraid.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm divorced and I'm the sole breadwinner and always have been. And I have 3 kids.
Yeah.
2 currently in college and 1 on the way. So
Yes.
that choice, and I'm not alone. I am so blessed to be able to afford to do more than the average American, right?
Right.
But at that moment, when I'm sitting in the drugstore parking lot, do I go in and get the shot that I completely disagree with at this moment in 2021? Or, do I get this or do I walk and then not be able to pay for my kids, to pay my mortgage, to support my family, my alimony, like all that? Am I willing to do that? And what am I going to do? So this is how millions of Americans feel. So this is not a woe is me. This is let's talk about the hypocrisy, because I believe that someday we're probably going to get back here again and there's going to be difficult decisions to be made again. But I did what I had. They're like, sorry, you have a choice, even though you don't have a choice if you want your job. So I went and did it. And then ironically, that day was the day that my podcast appearance was scheduled on Jay Cutler. So I was coming in hot, Tucker, off of getting this shot.
But you'd already obeyed their orders and done this thing you didn't want to do because you had to keep your job.
I complied.
You complied. So you'd already done it, but they just didn't want to be criticized for it, even though you had done it.
Yes. And I really tried to be careful with my words that day. But I specifically said, because I had the Band-Aid on my arm. Like I raced from there to and I was rushing and I had been emotional about it. And so I just set up my Zoom and went, and I didn't even think, And so Jay asked me about it right before, and I was like, ask what you want. I don't care. And then so when he said it and we're, rolling, I said, listen, I respect everybody's opinions. For me, I'm not comfortable getting this, but I had to do it in order to keep my job, a job that I love, because I loved it to the very last day, Tucker.
Yeah.
I said, but I believe that it is sick and scary for any company to tell their employees what to do with their body.
Yeah, what medical treatment to get.
Yes.
It's crazy.
But I said, but I work for a global company, Disney, and it doesn't surprise me. And so I had to do this to keep my job. I didn't want to, but I complied, and here we are. But I think it's wrong. And that was the beginning of the end.
So what did they say to you once you said that?
Oh, the phone call conversations from one boss in particular. He's like, you whacked the company. You can't whack Disney. You can't say those things. I said, what do you mean? I complied. I don't understand. And he said, you said it's sick and scary. I go, well, it is. That you all are telling me what to do with my body. He's like, you can't say that. You cannot criticize your employer. We found out through my attorney, our attorney, we have a similar attorney.
Yes.
That in the state of Connecticut, there's different laws. There's a statute that says, because obviously First Amendment, that does not cover employers.
Yes.
But in the state of Connecticut, there's a statute where you are allowed to criticize your employer if you're complying, and they cannot punish you for that. And so we found a loophole there. And even though it's crazy, because I complied, I shouldn't even have to find this, they found it. And this was a free speech lawsuit based on me being able to say that I can have an opinion about something you're forcing me to do to my body if I'm complying to your rules. And I did it. So first it went, but that was before, the immediate reaction was, you can't whack the company. You spoke poorly about Disney. You can't, you knocked Obama. I was like, I didn't knock Obama. I told,
because you acknowledged he had a white mom, which
because
is
I acknowledged a
limits.
story
No white moms
from 2014 that no white moms allowed, that had been said on the ABC network 6 years prior. What that was okay then, but not now. And so they suspended me, took me off the air, took events from me, made me publicly apologize, and then followed it up with a statement of their own saying we believe in diversity of thought. However,
yeah, you can't disagree with the vax or misgender someone. That's a really crazy. I mean, that was only a couple years ago, but it feels like a different time. Maybe things have gotten better.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I mean, I think as far as the vaccine conversation, again, all I wanted was time for more research to be done. I think now we all know 2 years later,
Yeah.
my gut, a lot of people's gut instinct about it was right. Especially when, wait, I thought we get this and we're not going to get COVID, right? Well, we get it and we're not going to spread it, right? Like all of the things that have been well documented, which we choose to ignore now. It just goes away that we were forced to do it. So I think that just quietly goes away. At the end of the day, and I really mean this because what happened to me happened. It was a brutal decision to have to decide to publicly stand up and file a lawsuit. Like that was another level because this is the company that I loved, the job that I dreamt of since I was 11 years old and did it at the highest level and loved every moment, literally. But to decide to do that, because obviously it's going to be really loud and really public, and to sue Disney and ESPN, you don't do that, especially I went back to this shy 11-year-old kid. Yes. Like, oh my gosh, they're all going to hate me. And but then you have to decide for yourself. Can you look yourself in the mirror? Can you go to sleep at night? And when I'm preaching to my children and other young women and men out there and broadcasters to be true to yourself and to stand tall and to not just take it when you disagree with something, do it nicely, do it civilly.
Exactly.
So this is not even about me anymore. Like I've been canceled. I'm fine. I'm still standing. I'm alive, but my goal with the lawsuit, my goal today and every day, honestly, it sounds dramatic, but till the day I die, is to use this platform that I've been given and earned, but been given, and I believe that's a faith thing as well, to say to these companies, no, you cannot pick and choose who is allowed to speak. My network, ESPN, allowed at the same time as mine going on, my peers, co-hosts, to go on SportsCenter, to go on NBA shows and talk about Roe versus Wade and talk about George Floyd and talk about these things on a sports show. That's not why you do you, I guess, right? Like run the company how you want, but to encourage that. But then when I'm on my own talking about my experience as a biracial woman or my experience with a vaccine mandate, even though I complied and you punish me and take things away, that's not okay. And if we truly believe in diversity, like I'm done. It's diversity of thought. We must begin there. And it was completely hypocritical. And I hope and pray that by little old me trying to stand up against big bad Disney, I mean, it really is David versus Goliath, that maybe more companies, more bosses, more leaders will begin to realize, listen, it's all or nothing. Just keep the rules consistent for everybody. You can't say they can speak and talk about abortion on an NBA show and not let the others.
They literally promoted abortion on an NBA program?
Well, when Roe versus Wade came down, and then we have anchors crying on TV. And then
For real?
Yes, and we have people giving moments of silence for Don't Say Gay on women's college basketball program. And they took a moment of silence on live TV to talk about the Don't Say Gay. And I don't know if you read the bill. Those words aren't in there. I can't.
To pray to what?
Well, I don't know that they were concerning prayer.
I don't think they're praying to anything.
Probably not. Moment of silence. So the hypocrisy was too thick for me to remain silent. And I pray that leaders begin to realize you can't pick and choose who can speak. It's diversity of thought, or don't let anybody.
It feels like, I mean, throughout our lives, looking back, it's obvious that some of the worst things are some of the best things. Obviously a horrible experience for you at ESPN, but on some level, aren't you glad you're gone?
Glad and glad I'm gone. They're kind of two different things. I mean, at the end of the day, yes. I'm still heartbroken that it happened the way it did.
Yes.
It didn't have to.
Yes.
And I loved what I did. And it took me years to get there. And it was super hard to stay there.
Yeah.
Not the most welcoming, nurturing place where you're being uplifted and encouraged and just even given constructive criticism to continue to get better.
Right.
But I did it, damn it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad because I can finally speak without being in fear.
Yeah.
Knowing again that like it's a lot bigger than me. I thought through the years I was just following my dream, and then along the way, I had young women reaching out and saying, "Oh my gosh, back in the day, my bosses said you have to straighten your hair and you can't look. That's not what anchors on TV look like, especially national TV, And so I have young girls saying, "You're the first woman I saw that just owned your hair and didn't straighten and have the anchor bob and all that."
Yeah.
And so I I just was talking about sports, like naive, but I didn't realize that I was being an example
Right.
for other young women out there and Black women and just the diversity part. And so then when I realized that, what an honor, you know? So I'm sad that I don't have that platform to continue to do that, but I did it for almost 17 years.
Yeah.
And now I'm excited at the potential of doing it. I mean, look, I get to talk to Tucker Carlson, where other people who have no idea who I am will see me, and forget about this stuff. I'm just saying about being true to who we are
100%.
and standing up for what we believe in.
And not lying. No, I totally
I did have to
agree.
lie. I had to lie a lot
Yeah.
about things that I didn't agree with that we were doing on the air.
Like, tell me.
Well, to not be able to ask specific questions about, you know, when we had athletes all of a sudden collapse, LeBron's son.
Yep.
It's a fair question to ask if he had had the vaccine.
Yes. He's a young man.
Healthiest possible.
Exactly.
That's one example. But to not be able to go there and ask those questions.
They wouldn't let you ask.
Oh, no. And it wasn't just me. It was other pieces that were done on Outside the Lines about it. But to me, I don't care if you're LeBron's son or if you're my neighbor. Like, you're a young man in particular, because there's some science behind that. I know we don't like the science word now, but there's some science behind that, right? And so if an 18-year-old kid is suddenly collapsing.
Especially a boy. That's right.
Yeah, if I'm his mother, I'm asking, okay, did he collapse because it was raining today versus sunny? Like, any potential reason for
Of
this
course,
sudden
all the
collapse,
variables.
you're going to ask as a journalist. I'm not saying it was the vax, because I don't know. I'm not a
Of
doctor.
course, I get it.
But we must ask this question. But those questions were absolutely not allowed. And they were never asked on the network.
Why would I mean, I believe you, and I've certainly seen a lot of that working in the media. But you got to wonder about the motive. I mean, why would ESPN want to run cover for Pfizer? Like, why do they care? But they do care so much.
I don't know. Pfizer, Moderna, J&J,
Yeah.
CDC, Fauci, like it goes deep, right?
It goes very deep. It's just
Disney, though. I mean, I think we have to remember
yeah.
who runs ESPN. And I think that Disney, when you look at the decisions Disney has made for many years, despite it really affecting their bottom line, right? They've continued. Recently, Bob Iger came out, I think, in that SEC filing, acknowledging that they went too woke in many areas. And look at what's happened with the what used to be incredible content that Disney used to put out,
Yes.
you know, and look what's happened, and look at the numbers and the
Look at
losses.
ESPN and the numbers there. I mean, that's part of my question. Do you think you got out in retrospect at the right time?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, do you think ESPN will be a force in sports news in 10 years?
You know, I think, well, it all goes back to the rights deals.
Yeah.
And because I hear all the time on social media that the only reason that they watch ESPN is because, you know,
They've
college
got the
football national
games.
championship,
Yeah.
they have the games, they have the live broadcasts, and the ESPN knows that, which is why they've tried to create other revenue streams and, you know, digital and, you know, the ESPN Plus, which hasn't done great. Disney Plus has not done great.
Yeah.
And so people feel it. Again, people don't come to ESPN to talk politics. But hey, it's not just ESPN. The leagues have done it. Look at what the NBA has done, and kind of shoving it down your throats. And then on the courts, it says Black Lives Matter. Still in some places. And it's like, wait, we're not paying attention to what we now know factually about Black Lives Matter. So I'm just never surprised anymore. My point is, just because I'm not surprised doesn't mean I give up. We give up. Those of us who aren't afraid anymore. If we give up, I feel like we're complicit.
Did any, that's for certain. You're exactly right there, I think. Did any other anchors express empathy, offline, privately?
There were a few. There were definitely a few, and anchors or reporters or analysts for sure. There's a lot of people who feel the way I feel about many things. A lot of men who work there, who are on air, who wrote and said, you know, I don't know that it's courage, but they said, I wish I had the courage that you have.
Oh, that's so embarrassing. I mean, come on, get some dignity, right? I mean,
I agree. Grow a pair.
Yeah.
You know? And at the same time, I do try to put myself in their shoes.
No, I get it.
As white men.
Yeah, no, I get it.
When you don't have endless money and you have a family to support, white men are not allowed to have a voice in that part of the industry. And so I understand the fear, but I also see Black men and people who are allowed to say whatever they want quite often on social media at ESPN, who have daughters who are athletes, who are silent. And I know damn well that they're not letting a guy, a biological male, play against their daughter on the volleyball court.
Of course not.
But they're silent. And so
why?
I think that, well, I think it just goes back to the woke.
But I mean, if like Michael Wilbon, or whatever, someone
whom I love.
Yeah.
But we think completely differently on everything. But
then Wilbon's views may be totally sincere. But like if someone who's established and made some dough, you can say whatever you want. Why don't they?
I think it's this kind of what I dealt with as a young woman and middle-aged woman for years. It's that fear of being disliked and attacked.
Yeah.
So these big, strong, tough football players,
Yeah.
and NBA players who have millions of dollars in the bank, who are now analysts, especially in the African-American community. Like, I know for the most part with this topic of transgender, this in sports issue, we're on the same page.
They're not into it at all.
Hell no.
Yeah.
But they're silent. And to me, that's the worst thing, is when they know, and they can't afford to speak up. Again, it's never against the transgender community. It's in support of women. And if we focus on that. So I actually have lost a ton of respect for a lot of those people because they just go like this. But then when there's other issues that do go along with the narrative, then it's let's go and let's pound the table and pound the fist and that's the
three or four of those guys just decided, we're not going to lie anymore and just say what they thought. You can't fire them all.
You can't. That's why I said, as at least as women, like, let's come together and do this because they need us, and we're right.
Well, just as a factual matter, you're right. It's not it's not some sort of like, why did the First World War start? It's, can a man become a woman by wishing it so? No.
Hashtag science.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that smart, but I know.
Not either. Yeah, even I can perceive that. So how long has it been since you left ESPN?
August 14th, 2023.
August 12th.
So,
oh, wow. Oh, just the other day.
I know. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's weird because it becomes kind of part of your identity, right?
Oh, of course.
I should ask you for advice because it's even if you know it's the right thing, they're still almost traumatic because, especially if you loved it.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I haven't missed it.
Right.
Which is weird. I thought that I would. I haven't watched any of it. I watched some games, but I don't watch it because I don't think I realized just the grind of 28 years in the industry in general, But I
did 28 years in the industry. I know that number. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
A lot. And it's every ounce of it, ups and downs. It was such an honor. And who knows what's next as far as like, the next chapter, long term, hopefully, round 2. But I don't know. I really feel like I was there for a reason, probably a reason that I'm not even fully clear on.
That's right.
Right now. And that's a faith thing, a trust thing. But I also, it was exhausting the last 2 years because I sued the company while I was still on their air.
Yeah.
Usually that doesn't happen. It's after you leave a company.
Yeah, they
so
try and prevent that from happening.
I mean, again, not what I wanted, Tucker, but to continue to go on the air every day, I got really good at compartmentalizing, and walking in that building, knowing that there were a lot of people who hated me because I was speaking. And so, but I had a job to do, and I had a 2-hour live show every day to co-host with a great co-host. Matt Berry's the best and the best producers. And I was hands-on in every single interview, for 2 hours live, highlights. And so it was awesome to be able to realize I found a way to put it back here for 2 hours and be all in, and let go of that fear of my peers, who there were a lot who hated me for what I was saying and doing. But that took a toll. That took a toll those last 2 years. And so when it ended, it was a relief because to kind of balance that while going on the air, knowing that my bosses hated me.
It's awful.
Yeah.
I have to say, having spent a long time in that business, and then you leave and you realize that like not everything is television. Kind of like there's a whole world out there, and TV is a bit of a biosphere. It's very self-referential. Everyone in TV watches TV. They talk to other people who work in TV. They think about TV all the time. And I don't think that's the experience of most people on the planet at this point. You know what I mean? You don't realize how isolated you are when you work in that business, and you get out and like, actually nobody really cares.
Oh
you
my
know
gosh.
What I mean?
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're brainwashed.
Yeah, it's a bit of a cult for sure.
Total cult, and especially in the sports world, and especially that ESPN world, because it's the worldwide leader in sports, and this is the pinnacle. Yeah. And you think it all revolves around you or your network or what you're doing. And that's exactly what I said to my parents recently. There's a whole world out there.
Yes.
Who doesn't give a crap about some
at all
sports anchor. And it's beautiful. And I'm so excited to continue to learn about that and to just be, it's been awesome to be more present. My youngest is a senior in high school. Like, this is it before all three are in college. And, you know, as a mom, and I had all three really close together, less than 4 years. And there were a lot of sacrifices to try to do it all and be the best anchor and make sure my bosses knew how committed I was, which comes across from your work.
Yes.
I kept getting promoted in new contracts, so they agreed, you know, but like that mom guilt that is always there. And I know dads have it too, but to try to be, I was the room mom for all three at the same time. You couldn't just do just two or else you don't care about that third kid, right? Of course. So that balance, and what a blessing to be able to be so present for my kids. Most importantly, yes, that's number one. Actually, 1A was when I reflect back on the actual decision to stand up. The night before the lawsuit dropped, I spoke to each kid separately. And I have two girls and my son's in the middle. He's 19 now. And I just said, listen, I want you to know, to all three of them, I want you guys to know this is coming and it's going to suck, because other things that were public, they were attacked. People find your kids on social media, as you know. Of course, yes. Teachers would say things to my kids, like just gross. I said, I need you to know you don't ever have to defend me, ever. If someone asks you and you're so inclined, I would just say, we all have a right to our opinion. My mom has hers. Yes. And just leave it at that. But don't ever feel the need to defend me. And I said, I just want you to know I'm sorry for anything that might come your way. Please let me know, but know that I'm trying to do this just for others as well. And my son, who's the quiet one of the three, you know, psycho girls.
Always got sisters, yes. Seen it.
He looked at me. This is the only time I get choked up. He looked at me and he said, Mom, it's about time you stood up for yourself.
Well, good for him.
At the time he was 17. So they see more than we think.
Well, I agree.
And I thought I was a really good actress, and hiding the disappointment and kind of the pain when employers, people that you trust and love and are friends with and have had to your home, crush you intentionally. And for my kid to say that, my son, I realized, wow, I wonder if he's been disappointed that I just took it to pay the bills and to be safe, because it's easier to be quiet. So I knew no matter what happened, even if I lost the lawsuit, even no matter what, my kids knew that their mom stood up for what she thought was right. And I can die knowing that no matter what happens in my future. Your kids, for me, it's my parents and my kids and my God, that they're the ones that matter about like what they think of me. Nobody else does. So it was kind of peaceful to go into that lawsuit. So when it dropped the next day, and it was like, ugh, I knew my kids were okay.
Well, you're blessed then, because that's a realization most people have only on their deathbed. And you're very generous to tell your kids they don't need to defend you. I told my kids, find the heaviest object you can lift and defend me at all costs.
I know you did.
That's your moral duty.
Or I'm not just paying for your college. Right?
Just kidding. I never talked to you.
I love it.
Well, yeah, I think you're an amazing person, and I am completely convinced whatever you do next will be worth watching, and we will be. And I'm grateful that you came.
Thank you. It means the world that.
Oh, I mean it.
It means the world that you care so much about this country. It's everything. As an Army kid, like what you do, and it's been a choice. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to continue to stand up and speak truth. You are the role model for me and so many others. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's been easy and fun. But Sage Steele, thank you very much. Depressing, but also Byzantine and interesting murder trial in South Carolina tonight. We've got Judge Janine in a moment. to take us through exactly what happened and what happens next. But first, you always imagine in your mind's eye that it's evil men who destroy a society, wild-eyed, spit-flecked dictators pounding the podium to demand the annihilation of their enemies. That's the Hollywood version of it. But in real life, people like that rarely get very far. They're too obvious. It's not the cartoon demons you've got to worry about. It's weak men in positions of power. They're the most dangerous. Men with no principles but the desire for self-preservation. Hollow men who live in terror of being revealed for who they really are. Men who will do anything to save themselves. That's who you should be afraid of. And you can see that in our current moment. The weakest are the most destructive. How much of his childhood do you think Adam Kinzinger spent hanging from the wedgie nail? How many swirlies did Eric Swalwell endure in high school? How old was Adam Schiff before a girl other than his sister kissed him voluntarily? It makes you shudder to think about it. These are sad, insecure, broken men filled with envy and bitterness from their lonely childhoods. They hate you because they hate themselves. It's not their masculinity that's toxic, it's their lack of it. That's really the story of the Biden administration. The weakest president in history joined forces with the weakest attorney general in history to create a police state. Shocking? Well, once you understand the principle, it shouldn't really surprise you. And it's funny now to remember that the smart people in Washington once told us that Merrick Garland was a moderate. They thought that apparently because when Garland's promised Supreme Court seat didn't materialize, he cried. Oh, he's crying, they thought. He's so sensitive and thoughtful. But no. Merrick Garland was crying for himself because he is a self-pitying careerist with no perspectives on his own life, whose job is everything to him. He is, in other words, literally the last person you would ever put in charge of the Department of Justice. So naturally, Joe Biden did. And that turned out to be a pivotal decision. Merrick Garland has presided over the most aggressive attack on civil liberties, and in particular an attack on the practice of traditional Christianity, that any living American has seen. Now, Garland would never say that in public, of course. That would be too straightforward. His approach is feline, not canine. Every word is a weasel word. But under sustained questioning, the real Merrick Garland emerges, and it is filthy and dishonest. Here he was in the Senate yesterday, facing off against Mike Lee of Utah.
DOJ has announced charges against 34 individuals for blocking access to or vandalizing abortion clinics. And there have been over 81 reported attacks on pregnancy centers, 130 attacks on Catholic churches since the leak of the Dobbs decision, and only 2 individuals have been charged. So how do you explain this disparity?
We apply the law equally. I will say you're quite right. There are many more prosecutions with respect to the blocking of the abortion centers, but that is generally because those actions are taken in, with photography at the time, during the daylight, and seeing the person who did it is quite easy. Those who are attacking the pregnancy resources centers, which is a horrid thing to do, are doing this at night in the dark.
Okay, in case you didn't follow that, we quote, apply the law equally. We just can't, for some reason, manage to investigate crimes that occur after dark. It's the sundown rule, well known in legal circles. It's hard to believe that Merrick Garland actually said that in a Senate hearing until you remember that, of course, he will say anything, and he does. We're not persecuting Christians, he'll tell you. Then he'll send the FBI after Mark Houck. Houck is a pro-life lay preacher who was praying outside an abortion clinic when a pro-abortion extremist harassed his 12-year-old son. So as any father would, Houck shoved the man out of his son's face. That's what happened. It was not a crime. We know that because no local prosecutor pursued it. And it is certainly, without question, not a federal felony to push a lunatic out of your 12-year-old son's face. But under Merrick Garland, it is now a felony. Almost a year after that happened, Garland sent armed men to arrest Mark Houck in front of his family.
On September 23rd, about 6:45 in the morning, that's when those 20 so-called agents, full SWAT gear, heavily armored vests, ballistic shields, helmets, battering ram, banged on my door.
Yesterday, Josh Hawley asked Garland to explain that behavior, the utterly indefensible totalitarian behavior. And Merrick Garland, of course, in his soft-spoken way, was delighted to defend it.
Let's take a look at the hardened criminals that your Justice Department sent these armed agents to go terrorize on that morning. Here they are at Mass. Here's the 7 children with Mr. Houck and his wife. He has offered to turn himself in, and this is who you go to terrorize. You are the Attorney General. Give me your answer. Do you think that it was objectively reasonable and they followed your guidelines in sending 20 to 30 armed agents to terrorize these people? Yes or no?
The facts I have, which are those presented by the FBI, are not consistent with your description.
So you think it was reasonable?
I'm saying the facts are not as you describe.
You use an unbelievable show of force with guns that I just note liberals usually decry. We're supposed to hate long guns and assault-style weapons. You're happy to deploy them against Catholics and innocent children.
He doesn't care. He's got no soul, obviously. And if anything, Josh Hawley's description is too narrow. It's not just Catholics that Merrick Garland has targeted with force. It's anybody who expresses a belief in biblical Christianity in public. But it is true that Catholics do seem to be getting a disproportionate share of federal law enforcement attention under Joe Biden. The FBI, as you may know, just drafted a memo claiming that radical traditional Catholics are somehow a national security threat, presumably because they tend to pray outside of abortion clinics. In March of 2021, Paul Vaughn and 10 others were peacefully praying at an abortion clinic in Tennessee. They didn't damage any property. They hurt no one. More than a year after they dared to do that, to pray, Merrick Garland sent the FBI to terrorize Vaughn and his 11 children at their home. You have to wonder when you see a tape like that, where are so-called Christian leaders? Where's Russell Moore and all the other breastfeeding Christians as that happens, as the U.S. government cracks down on Christianity, on prayer? Silent. Paul Vaughn and his co-conspirators now face more than a decade in prison. Meanwhile, just in case you want to know what the scale is for punishment, the Department of Justice under Joe Biden let half the rioters go who tried to torch a courthouse in Oregon. No charges whatsoever. Of 99 cases that the Portland U.S. Attorney brought over that courthouse siege for crimes like assaulting federal officers and civil disorder, more than 47 were dropped by DOJ. The most serious penalties for most of the defendants who pleaded guilty turned out to be community service. So the DOJ under Merrick Garland absolves Joe Biden voters of actual terrorism while doing everything they can to terrify, humiliate, and destroy people who pray in public. They're targeting specifically anyone who is religious, humiliating them in front of their children. Now, why are they doing this? Well, because on some level, all governments hate religious people because it's competition. And revolutionary governments, totalitarian governments, go after religious people first. It happened in the French Revolution, happened in the Bolshevik Revolution, and it's happening now. That's why parents who dare to complain about their children being sexually indoctrinated and openly sexualized are attacked, in some cases, by the DOJ. Again, you can see why. Young people raised to believe that God is in charge are much harder for the government to control as they grow up. They won't worship the government. But, by contrast, if a child is raised to be a narcissist, someone who thinks, well, I can change my gender, he will grow up confused, weak, and reliant on the people in charge of the state. It's a very simple principle. It's why the Maoist government went after Tibetan monks. Anyone who sincerely believes in God is a threat, and that is the measure of a free country in the end. Are you allowed to believe that there's an authority higher than the people in charge of your government? That has always been the hallmark of America, religious liberty. It's in the First Amendment. But in Canada, of course, that's all disappeared. Canada has now become an atheist totalitarian state with amazing speed. And in Canada, it's now a crime to object to sexualized drag shows for children. You're not allowed to say a word. Late last month, a pastor in Calgary was violently thrown out of an all-ages, in other words, for children, drag queen story hour for daring to object to the sexualization of children. Watch this. So that's the video. That's what happened. Who committed the violence in that video? The guy on the ground was the pastor. Before we answer the question, some context will remind you that in Canada, showing any disloyalty at all to the Trudeau government could get your bank account frozen and your truck seized. So maybe you're not surprised to learn that that man on the ground, whose name is Pastor Derek Reamer, who showed profound disrespect for Justin Trudeau's ongoing efforts to sexualize children and mutilate the genitals of children, woke up yesterday to the police banging on his door and telling him he was going to be arrested.
Why are you showing up at my home?
Because this is where you live, right?
Yeah, you guys could call me. Yeah, we could.
Sorry, what was that?
You could have called me.
I've been trying to.
When?
This morning. We need to talk about what happened on the weekend this evening, right?
Why do we need to talk about it?
Because you're going to be arrested for it and charged.
Okay.
So we can go deal with it this morning, or I can just put warrants out for you.
Charged with what?
Mischief and causing a disturbance.
Where are all the professional Christians? You have to wonder that again. Where's David French and Beth Moore and Tim Keller and all these people who are defending Christianity as actual Christians are being arrested for being Christians? Not a word. Well, today, Pastor Derek Reamer confirmed that a warrant was out for his arrest for hate crimes, and he was right about that. He was not overstating it, because this afternoon, he was literally arrested. Why? That doesn't look like the Canada you thought you knew. All Molson and sled dogs, or some stormtrooper in sunglasses won't answer a question before you provide your ID. And then the pastor sitting in a car with bars on the windows, getting hauled away to jail for being thrown to the ground at Drag Queen Story Hour. We're going to be joined by Pastor Derek Reamer tonight, but he is, of course, in jail. So instead, we are grateful to be joined by Ezra Levant of Rebel News, which filmed the tape you just saw. Ezra, thank you so much for coming on. It's hard to believe that this is happening in your country. Meta question first, is anyone saying anything about it other than you?
Not a lot. I mean, Tucker, you have done more journalism on Christian pastors being jailed in Canada than most Canadian media. In fact, the Canadian media either ignore it or cheer it on, calling these people bigots. I should say that there were no charges emanating from the Drag Queen Story Hour itself, neither against Pastor Reimer or against the three men who roughed him up. But then the left-wing mayor of Calgary went on a Twitter rant saying that anyone who lies or engages in vitriol or is full of hate should be arrested and charged. Now, those aren't crimes, by the way. Some of them are a matter of opinion. I could think that the mayor's full of hate. But after the mayor basically directed police to arrest peaceful protesters, they did. And you saw that cop. I think he was embarrassed and ashamed of what he was doing. He had sunglasses on. He was blocking our cameraman. He had that bizarre move, show me your ID before I answer a question. I think he knows that he is doing something contrary to his oath as a police officer. Right now, we have a reporter staked out at the city jail because, Tucker, I don't know if, he's charged with mischief and causing a disturbance. Of course, he was the one who was disturbed by the roughing up. It'll be interesting to see if he gets out on bail or, like Arthur Pawlowski, the other Christian pastor, if he'll serve 50 days in prison, which is what happened then.
I say this as one of the few Americans I know really who sincerely loves Canada, and I mean that. But it does seem like darkness is descending on your country.
I have to say, just a few weeks ago, Justin Trudeau's martial law, where he seized bank accounts and deployed riot horses because some people were honking their horns in their trucks and having a festive, peaceful opposition to the lockdowns, a judge had a lengthy inquiry, and he said, thumbs up, that there was a justification for martial law. And so I'm telling you, Tucker, the checks and balances in Canada no longer work. The opposition parties often don't oppose. The media cheerleads. It's not skeptical or critical. The courts are of no use. Not a single lockdown law was overturned. Our so-called Charter of Rights and Freedoms has not struck down a single action like this. And I'm starting to think that we might need help from abroad. And so I'd say to your audience, I know you have senators and congressmen who care about civil rights and human rights in China and Iran and places like that. And I would say, please, cast an eye up to Canada too, because I'm worried that we no longer have the capacity to push back for human rights. And Canadian politicians are very attentive when Americans criticize or mention them. Please, American senators and congressmen, put us on your watch list. Things are getting bad up here.
And for context, for those who don't know, I mean, you do run the biggest dissident media organization in the country. So you speak with authority. Ezra, we are definitely rooting for you, and God bless and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
So teachers in this country losing their jobs for trying to protect their children from efforts to sexualize them. In the Drupa School District in California, teachers are prohibited from telling parents when their children are, quote, transitioning to another gender. So your kid could be getting castrated, or chemically or physically, and you're not allowed to know that. Jessica Tapia teaches in that district. She refused to comply with the policy. She said it violated her Christian beliefs as well as her basic responsibilities as a teacher, so she was fired for that. She's brave enough to join us now, along with her attorney, Brad Dacus. Thank you both very much for coming on. Jessica, first to you, I assume the other teachers in your district complied with this grotesque order. Why did you not?
Great question, Tucker. I'm truly afraid that many other teachers don't even know they're under these directives. I didn't know I was under these directives until I found out. And when I found out from my school district that I was under these directives, I chose to speak up about them and stand my ground and stand in my faith and beliefs. And that's when they said that's going to be an issue. You have to comply with these directives or your job is on the line. And so I chose God. I chose to stick with my Christian faith. And because of that, they released me from employment because, in their words, they could not accommodate my religious beliefs.
But I mean, you were also, and bless you for doing that, and you should do that, but you were also siding with parents, all of whom, no matter who they voted for in the last election, you'd think would want to know if their children are being castrated, like their children. Don't you think parents want to know?
Yes, I think parents have the right to know everything about their children, and I will not partake in withholding any information from a parent. I'm a parent myself, and I would be very upset about that. So this fight is not just for the sake of my job loss. This fight is for the protection of all children. This fight is for the preservation of parental rights.
Well, amen. But Brad, is this, since you're the attorney here, is it legal to fire someone for refusing to hide essential facts from parents who are the guardians of these children?
Yeah, this is a clear breach of public trust, and it's a clear violation of her Title VII rights. She was fired not because of the job she did, Tucker. She was fired because of her religious beliefs. And mind you, she's not alone. We at Pacific Justice Institute, we're representing hundreds of people, employees who are fired because of their faith. And the issue is also one of the parents. They're scared, Tucker. Right now, they see all of what's going on. They're horrified by it. And it's for that reason, on our website, we've developed customized opt-out forms for all 50 states where parents for free can download opt-out forms, start learning what their rights are, as well as the material that's being given to the kids and their grandkids throughout the country in public schools.
I mean, Jessica, I have to ask, were there, and I know the answer I want to hear, were there teachers you work with who came up to you and congratulated you for your bravery, I hope?
You know, Tucker, I'm being totally overwhelmed in the best way possible with hundreds of teachers reaching out to me, telling me that they're ready to die on this hill with me, that they completely align with my views on this, that they are ready to stand up to this beast with me and stand for the protection of children and stand for parental rights and, you know, stand for the fact of the matter that as Christians, we can also be in the public sector. And at this point, I feel that I was told you need to choose one or the other. Do you want to be a public school teacher or do you want to continue practicing your Christian faith?
Well, good for you. We're always mean to teachers, but I married one, and I know there are a lot of wonderful teachers, and you're obviously one of them. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Tucker.
So much.
Fox News alert on a case you may have been following, a verdict in the double murder trial of disbarred lawyer Alex Murdaugh. The trial attracted a lot of attention. The family is prominent in the state of South Carolina. There was a press conference moments ago. Here's part of it.
Justice was done today. It doesn't matter who your family is. It doesn't matter how much money you have or people think you have. It doesn't matter what you think, how prominent you are. If you do wrong, if you break the law, if you murder, then justice will be done in South Carolina And I think South Carolina has shown the nation and the world how a process can work and work well.
Fox's Trace Gallagher is rooted in this trial. He's been following it for 6 weeks since the beginning. He joins us tonight for a recap. Hey, Trace.
And Tucker, it's about as fast a verdict as I've ever seen. The jury of 8 women and 4 men deliberated for just under 3 hours. And usually when you have 76 witnesses, it takes several hours just to review the testimony. So a quick verdict is often beneficial to the defendant, but not this time. And remember, Alec Murdaugh's defense was basically, yes, I'm a liar. Yes, I'm a crook. Yes, I'm a drug addict, but I'm not a killer. Most attorneys we spoke with during the trial say Alec Murdaugh's biggest hurdle was cell phone video where you could hear Alec Murdaugh's voice proving that he was in the kennel, that's the scene of the crime, just moments before the killings happened. Murdaugh told investigators that he was not in the kennel. But after being caught red-handed on tape, he later testified that he lied about not being in the kennel because his drug habit had left him paranoid. Murdaugh wanted the jury to believe he left the kennel, went to his house, did not hear any gunshots, returned to the kennel, and found the bodies of his wife and son. He also testified that he held their bodies, despite having no blood evidence on his clothing. It's notable the murder weapons were never found in this case, so it was impossible to connect Murdaugh to any of the weapons, and there was little, if any, forensic evidence implicating Murdaugh. But the circumstantial evidence, as you heard, was robust. In fact, the lead prosecutor moments ago in that news conference that's now over says they knew if they had a chance to put on their case that truth would prevail. And it's important to remember Alec Murdaugh testified in his own defense. Most analysts thought he was a very effective witness. The jury clearly did not share that opinion. Tucker.
Amazing. Very sad story. Trace Gallagher, thank you for that.
Yep. Yep.
So as you just heard, prosecutors did hold a press conference very recently when prosecutors spoke about the victims in this crime. Here's part of it.
Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other kind. I kind of want to adopt that and say we may have the worst criminal justice system in the world, but it's better than every other kind that there is. And our criminal justice system worked tonight. It gave a voice to Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, who were brutally mowed down and murdered on the night of June 7th, 2021 by someone that they loved and someone that they trusted. And they couldn't be here to testify for themselves tonight. Their testimony came through the evidence and the information that was gathered by the men and women of the agencies I've just mentioned. It came from the testimony of the agents and the investigators and the attorneys and the folks in our staff who were able to get it to the court record. And so I want to say tonight, their voice was heard tonight and justice was brought for them. We can't bring them back, but we can bring them justice.
Judge Jean Pirro is co-host of The Five, has also been following this case, and we're happy to have her join us tonight. Judge, thanks so much for coming on. What's your takeaway from this very, very sad and ugly saga?
Well, I followed this case from the beginning. There were something like 28 days of testimony. It was a span of about 6 weeks. Incredibly fast verdict, especially in a case that's circumstantial. But all murder cases, essentially, because the victim isn't going to come back and say, he killed me, or unless there's a video or an eyewitness, they are all circumstantial. This family was from one of the wealthiest, most successful, legendary family in that county in South Carolina. This defendant was arrogant enough to think that he could take the stand and convince the jury that, yes, I took pills and I was a drug addict and I stole from people, a quadriplegic and young women and my housekeeper and all that other stuff, but I didn't kill my wife and son. And okay, maybe you can buy that. But the problem is that he lied until he was mandated to admit as a result of a Snapchat video that was released not that long ago that had his voice at the scene of the crime within minutes of the crime. And it was curious to me why, Tucker, the defense wanted to take the jury to the scene of the crime. If anything, by the defense taking the jury there, they were able to assess how far the house was where the defendant said, I was taking a nap, is sleeping, and I didn't hear any gunshot wounds, to the distance at the kennels where you would have heard the gunshot wounds. So that was kind of bizarre, but I think his taking the stand was bizarre. Everyone agreed he was a good witness, but he was too slick, because in the end, the jury bought none of this. The judge did not even offer the jury dinner. He said, you've got beverages, soda, chips, and, cookies or whatever. The judge eventually said there was an overwhelming evidence of guilt here after the jury returned the verdict.
May I ask you a question? You said he was slick, he was very good as a witness. This guy's an ambulance chaser, right? Isn't he a slip and fall lawyer who's used to arguing cases?
He is an excellent attorney. And that's what people
Well, I meant that as an insult.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But look, he was an attorney with a huge law firm that made a lot of money. He made a lot of money. He spent a lot of it on drugs and just stealing. He just kept stealing to the next level. But this case came down, Tucker, to the classic motive, means, and opportunity. The shell casings, although they never found the guns, were consistent on the property, a 1,700-acre property, as a shell casings from the weapon that killed Maggie, the wife. And the kind of gun that was used was his favorite kind of gun. So what you had here was a guy who had a wife who was speaking to a matrimonial attorney, a son that he called a little detective. Very important. He said, we have to talk to you about the pills. They were coming on to him strong that he was using opioids. And then we hear that at the scene of the crime, the dogs are not barking. So at the time, within minutes of the crime, there's nobody who's coming around who's a stranger cropping up on them and shooting the wife and son. This is a classic domestic violence case.
Wait, but can I ask, is this, you've been in the law a long time, is this common behavior for personal injury attorneys? Would you, I mean, not to generalize, but would you say?
Oh, well, I don't know any personal injury attorneys who killed somebody, but what I do know is that they're theatrical. To them, the courtroom is theater. And this guy thought he controlled the theater. And my understanding is that Harpootlian, the very well-respected and regarded defense attorney, didn't want him to take the stand. But the defendant makes the ultimate decision himself. The saddest part of this is that this is your classic domestic violence case. Husband kills his wife and his son, thinks that everybody is going to buy this, oh, poor me, poor me. And in the end, they saw him for what he was, a drug-addicted, thieving, conniving, lying, now a double murderer.
Amazing. What a sad story. I appreciate your analysis of it. Thank you. Judge Janine Pirro, the best. Thank you. Remember the shop teacher who brought the whole shop class into a sexual fetish with the cartoonishly large fake breasts? Well, we have an update on that case with our friend Chadwick Moore next. Now putting the face of a man posing as a woman on chocolate bar wrappers. This dude is called Faye Johnstone, called himself a proud slut, and said his female critics should be vilified so they, quote, don't dare to speak their views publicly. Okay. Here's Faye Johnstone, not a fascist or anything, who, by the way, runs a, quote, LGBTQ consulting firm that makes a ton of dough from Canada's government. Watch. I mean, like, what? Women, don't worry, we're not replacing you. Don't worry, everything's cool. Chadwick Moore is with The Spectator. He joins us tonight. Chadwick, I have so many questions for you, but one of them, like, where do we make up all these jobs? The economy's degrading, and this dude has found a job dressing like a woman, wearing a nose ring, and then he's gotten hired by Hershey's? Like, is there a major for that in college? Like, where do these jobs come from?
Yeah. Well, first of all, happy International Women's Awareness Month, or whatever it is right now. We all like a little nuts in our chocolate. I don't see what the big deal is. I love nuts in my chocolate, so I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's a real tragic start to Women's History Awareness Month that this shop teacher, who I think we all agree is delicate and as lovely and temperate as a summer's day, really, is under investigation for maybe not being really trans. When did we start questioning people's identity like this? She also, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but aside from being transgender, she's also disabled. She suffers from gigantomastia, which is an unusual swelling of the breast tissue. In her case, it's prosthetic breasts, which have apparently become sentient and swelling on their own. So, this is just how it is now. If you say you're a woman, that's how it is. And women seem to be okay with it because very few are speaking up and being loud about being erased in this way and taken over by men in dresses. And
talk about mansplaining, though. I mean, isn't this the ultimate mansplaining? I'm a woman now. You shut up, ladies. And they're like, okay, I'll shut up. If some dude just like a woman tells me what it's really like to be a woman, I guess I can't say anything. Like, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, you don't want to get knocked down and bruised by those prosthetic breasts. I wouldn't challenge that guy either.
You know what? That's a very good point. Chadwick Moore, common sense intrudes. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Well, here's a really cool story because the natural world is obviously the best and most beautiful and interesting place. A fishing boat just got caught in a massive shark feeding frenzy off the coast of Louisiana. The fishermen were on the search for yellowfin tuna and wahoo when dozens of sharks all of a sudden came around their boat feeding on a bait ball. And it's just an unbelievable series of pictures. Watch this. Mark Hardesty is the captain of the boat, Money Shot. He's one of the people who was there that day. He joins us now. Mark, I don't know how long you've been on the water, but have you ever seen anything like that in your life?
Well, not to this degree where they just came up under the boat like they did. We've seen it many times, though, because the shark population in the north central Gulf has exploded, kind of like a cockroach infestation, and it has just dramatically increased, and it has decimated a lot of the food fish and is working on the game fish that are so prevalent in Venice, Louisiana, because the federal restrictions under the Magnuson-Stevens Act have really done a toll on the fishery, and it's certainly a overregulation situation that's going on now.
Washington is not good at managing the natural world, I've noticed. So, I mean, I hope they're not going after redfish. And are they? And why do you think the shark population has exploded?
Well, the shark population, we believe, has exploded because of the restrictions on commercial fishing, quite frankly, and fishing in federal waters. Shark fishing is still allowed in state waters, and that puts really no dent in it in comparison to what's going on offshore. And in the Gulf, it's 9 miles and out or state or federal waters, and then 9 miles in or state waters.
So when you see a feeding frenzy over a bait ball like this, and you're on a boat, it's a decent-sized boat, 4 engines, but it's still an open boat. Do you have fantasies about falling in?
Well, certainly it crosses your mind, but I'm in a pretty seaworthy boat. I was in a 37 Freeman, which is a very seaworthy boat, and so there wasn't that much concern about that aspect of things. But certainly they were so frothed up in this frenzy that, certainly there's something that crosses your mind that one launches himself into the boat. Luckily that didn't occur, and unfortunately this is just occurring more and more. I've noticed an exponential increase in shark activity in the Gulf over the last 5 or 6 years. And what that's shown is that the Magnuson-Stevens Act has essentially, the harm that it has caused is simply been in place long enough to really start dramatically increasing the population of these sharks.
Yeah, I think people who understand nature should have a voice in the management of our natural world, but of course you don't, unfortunately. Mark Hardesty, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So official Washington has lost almost all control of itself at the idea that the public might get to see some of the videotape from January 6th. It needs to be hidden. Well, there's a new poll that shows actually most people completely disagree. Why can't we see it, says the poll. And we have those numbers, and the public is right in this case. We'll bring them to you after the break.
You know what the #1 best-selling book in the world is? It's the...
So the defenders of democracy are out defending democracy again. They're telling you it's really, really dangerous, and anyone would get to see the thousands of hours of surveillance footage from January 6th, which has been hidden from the public for 2 years, as a tiny group of people gets to make up stories about what happened that day and change the country on the basis of those stories. And we respectfully disagree. We think people should, in a democracy, be allowed to see what their government is doing and get as much evidence as they can. And it turns out the public agrees. Rasmussen, the polling firm, just found that 80% of American voters believe it's important that the public should be allowed to see the videos from January 6th. That would include 86% of Republicans, okay, but it would also include 78% of Democrats, 78% and 75% of independents. Wow. So you're defending democracy, but you're denying people information on the basis of which they can make their own decisions. How does that work exactly? Well, it's not democracy, of course. It's building a bulwark against your lies being revealed. And they are lying. And we know that because we've been looking at the tape. We're going to bring you information on the tape and some of it next week. And we think it's going to be really, really interesting. Winston Marshall played lead guitar and banjo for the band Mumford & Sons, which became internationally famous and successful, and for good reason. They're great. Then he made the mistake of mildly praising a book about Antifa writers that he read, written by Andy Ngo. And his life just changed in an instant. He became a political figure he didn't want to be. And ultimately, he was attacked so harshly he had to leave the band. So we thought it'd be interesting to spend an hour with him, and we just did for a brand new episode of Tucker Carlson today. He's a pretty amazing person, actually, we discovered. Here's part of our conversation.
The music industry and the creative industries more broadly was, there was the black squares on social media, and if you remember, there were a lot of actors and actresses fronting money to bail out the various rioters, and there was a big social media campaign to raise money here, and they were bailing out those who were arrested in the 2020 riots. And so that's actually the atmosphere, and I guess that's perhaps why what happened to me is because it was so contrary to the prevailing politics, I guess, of the creative industries. So I had very few followers, by the way. I think about 3,000 followers on Twitter. Somehow, this book, and it honestly feels like an act of God, which I know that sounds a bit crazy, but it
doesn't. For the record, it doesn't sound crazy at all.
My life sort of started to crumble. Initially, I was like, so what, it'll pass. But that's when you get the sort of phone calls from loved ones and friends and people you work with just panicking. And this dog pile actually became almost real life dog pile of just everyone in my life around me. And
what was their complaint?
Well, I guess the people I were working with, they were getting attacked by these Antifa, maybe not quite as much as me, but they were, they were getting harassed by these people as well. And they're very effective online. Like, for example, there was a whole night where they were changing my Wikipedia page from Winston Marshall is a banjo player to Winston Marshall is a fascist. And it was just, I had another friend trying to change it back, and they're just all night like at it, and they just swarm you like hornets in everything they do to try and destroy you.
If you wind up with a society that cannot tolerate a man like Winston Marshall, who is rational, reasonable, decent, that's a problem. That's on you, not on Winston Marshall. That whole conversation's on Fox Nation right now. Well worth it. So evidence emerges that a prominent House Democrat has direct ties to Chinese intelligence. But if you notice it, guess what you are? You're a racist! Great story. After the break. Judy Chu is a member of Congress from the state of California. Not super famous. We didn't know much about her. But then we saw a Daily Caller piece that had multiple photographs showing Judy Chu, member of Congress, accepting honorary appointments at two groups linked directly to Chinese intelligence. That's a huge problem. So this weekend, Congressman Lance Gooden of Texas suggested that maybe Judy Chu shouldn't have a security clearance. Maybe she should explain what she was doing with Chinese intelligence. That's not crazy. But of course, it caused a complete meltdown in the media. You're a racist! All right. Ying Ma is the author of the book Chinese Girl in the Ghetto, which is excellent, by the way. She joins us tonight to assess all of this. Ying Ma, thank you so much for coming on. So I don't really know what this has to do with race, but I can't help notice that when the pandemic first started, the Chinese government accused anybody who thought maybe it came from the Wuhan lab of racism. So I'm seeing kind of a playbook here.
Oh, yes, definitely. Now, I should say that no one should have her loyalty to America questioned based on race, but nobody should be able to cry racism in order to circumvent legitimate scrutiny of very troubling ties to communist China, especially to the Chinese Communist Party's front organizations here in the U.S. Now, Judy Chu has a habit of crying racism, not only regarding her own affiliations with these very disturbing groups, but also to thwart legitimate inquiry from Congress, as well as efforts to counter the Chinese threat. She in fact successfully stopped a Democratic colleague from joining a Republican effort to condemn China's role in spreading COVID in the early days of the pandemic. And she also opposed the recent creation of that very bipartisan Select Committee on China for the purpose of countering the Chinese threat from the Communist Party in China. So this kind of politics is poisonous. My organization, the American Ideals PAC, we were formed precisely to counter this type of politics. If you guys agree with that, find us, support us at AmericanIdealsPAC.com, AmericanIdealsPAC.com. The point of it all is that when people do this kind of race baiting, they're not even telling the truth. Judy Chu claims that whenever you criticize China this way, you're fanning anti-Asian violence and anti-Asian sentiments. But she is the last person who will tell you that many of these very gruesome physical attacks we've seen against Asians in this country are perpetrated by non-whites, not by white supremacists. These are people who are reluctant to say that. All they want to say is that Trump is at fault and Republicans are at fault.
She's a shill for China, obviously, and she's hiding it. Ying Ma, great to see you tonight. Thank you. Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight on a Friday. Last fall, a Democrat called Tony DeLuca got reelected to the Pennsylvania State House while dead. Not just dead inside, like most politicians, but actually dead, not breathing. And not only did DeLuca win after having been dead for a full month, but he won in a landslide. Tony DeLuca got more than 85% of the vote. Now, by any measure, that is embarrassing. Pennsylvania Democrats elected a dead man. They knew they were doing it. They did it anyway. This would seem to defeat the idea of representative democracy, which is that you vote for people so they can represent you. But party leaders in Pennsylvania were not embarrassed. They were proud. Quote, "Well, we're incredibly saddened by the loss of Representative Tony DeLuca," they said in a statement. "We are proud to see the voters continue to show their confidence in him and his commitment to democratic values by re-electing him posthumously." In other words, electing a guy who can't possibly represent you is not an offense against democracy. It's the essence of democracy. Now, it's not a typo. They put that in a press release. And actually, it makes a kind of sense when you remember that it was also in the state of Pennsylvania the Democratic Party leaders backed a Senate candidate called John Fetterman long after he had suffered a massive stroke and could no longer talk or communicate clearly. Here he is during one of his rare public appearances last year.
You're running for a seat that could decide the balance of power in Washington. What qualifies you to be a U.S. Senator? You have 60 seconds.
Hi, good night, everybody. If you work full-time, you should be able to live in dignity as well, true. And I believe they haven't have any businesses we can't have businesses being subsidized by not paying individuals that just simply can't afford to pay their own way.
You're saying tonight that you support fracking, that you've always supported fracking, but there is that 2018 interview that you said, quote, I don't support fracking at all. So how do you square the two?
I do support fracking, and I support fracking, and I stand and I do support fracking.
Now, that debate, as you well remember, was considered shocking by most everyone who saw it, but not by Democrats in Pennsylvania. They didn't seem even mildly ashamed to be caught running a candidate who couldn't speak. Fetterman's own wife, a former illegal alien called Giselle, candidly told reporters how she deals with her brain-damaged husband. Quote, you just ignore him when he's speaking. Now, Democratic voters love this because they always love it when women attack and diminish their own husbands. It makes them feel like they're not alone. It's totally normal to hate your husband. And of course, they took Giselle's advice and they elected John Fetterman to the Senate. In a party where no debate is allowed, it's not like you need a senator who can use words, or for that matter, a president who can think. Now, we naively assumed that Joe Biden would be in trouble during the 2020 primaries when he misidentified the state he was standing in, or mistook his sister for his wife, or made about 100 other weird and disjointed statements that suggested regular amphetamine injections were the only thing getting him through his rallies. Biden's senility seemed so obvious, and it was obvious. But what we missed was how much the Democratic Party had changed. Joe Biden's campaign was never about Joe Biden. He could have been anyone, dull or sharp, old or young, alive or dead. The candidate himself was irrelevant. What mattered was the power of the office. Democrats just wanted the seat. The details of who occupied it didn't matter to them. And as if to prove it, Dianne Feinstein has been a senator from California for more than 30 years. She's now 89, the oldest member of Congress, and she is sadly completely out of it. Last month, she learned that her staff had announced her retirement from the Senate. She had no idea. Watch this.
I haven't made that decision. I haven't released anything. It will be my plan. You put out the statement?
Put out your statement.
I didn't know they put it out.
Okay.
So it is what it is.
We put out your statement, Feinstein's staff informs her. We've decided you're leaving your job. And no, we didn't tell you because we don't care what you think. You're just the senator. Shut up and vote. And Dianne Feinstein just kind of nods and accepts it. Keep in mind, this person sits on the, quote, Intelligence Committee in the United States Senate. And it's sad, really. You'd think even a corrupt machine state like California would deserve more than this. Voters voted for her, assuming she would be aware of their surroundings and maybe keep their best interests in mind. But no, nobody in the party cares because representative democracy means nothing to Democratic leaders. And they don't mind if you know they feel that way. So that's how Washington actually works. But even by those low standards, it has been a little bracing to watch the short political career of John Fetterman unfold. Fetterman got to Washington in January and within a month suffered a mental breakdown so severe that he wound up in the psych ward where he remains tonight. And we're not mocking John Fetterman. Of course, we feel for him, sincerely. But the mercenaries in his orbit, very much including his wife Giselle, should be ashamed of what they have done. Apparently, Fetterman cracked under the strain of a Senate campaign in which he was forced to pretend that the brain damage he had suffered from a stroke wasn't actually a big deal. No problem, I'm fine. But he was not fine. He was so close to the edge that within weeks of getting to Washington, he wound up in a mental hospital as an inpatient. He has not appeared in public since. And we're supposed to think that's not a big deal. We're not even supposed to think about it. And just to show how completely normal it is for newly elected U.S. senators to have mental breakdowns and disappear from public view, that's such not a big deal that Fetterman somehow just co-sponsored legislation in the U.S. Senate. Quote, U.S. Senators Bob Casey and John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, reads a straight-faced news report, joined a bipartisan group of senators on Wednesday introducing new legislation aimed at preventing future freight train derailments like the one last month in East Palestine, Ohio. So here you have a guy who's getting round-the-clock psychiatric care deciding how to prevent train derailments. There's so many questions here. But the most obvious one is a logistical question. How is John Fetterman doing this if he's in the psych ward? And we don't know because no one will say. Fetterman's chief of staff, a man called Adam Gentleson, is blocking anyone who dares to ask that question on social media. On Twitter, for example, Stephen Miller of the last White House asked Gentleson this, quote, Adam, who is co-signing and introducing legislation from Senator Fetterman's office while he himself is currently hospitalized and under current medical observation? Oh, no answer. No answer. Gentleson just blocked Stephen Miller in response. So the problem with this is not John Fetterman himself. Once again, it's impossible not to feel sad for John Fetterman or anyone else who suffers from mental illness. A lot of us are eccentric. Some of us are very eccentric. And a tolerant and compassionate society should do its best to help people suffering from problems like depression or schizophrenia or whatever. The problem is that a society that elevates people who are mentally ill is doomed. Wouldn't a functional society elevate people to positions of leadership who are the wisest, the smartest, the sanest, who had the greatest degree of foresight and emotional self-control? Yes, it would. They would not intentionally put people in positions of authority who were incompetent. They would not allow John Fetterman to write railroad safety legislation from his bed in the psych ward. That is, pardon the description, insane. Biden, of course, will celebrate this as a new glass ceiling shattered, as if we're all empowered by being governed by people who can't think straight. But this is a dead end, this road. This way of thinking is destructive for everyone. It's not empowering, it's grotesque. And if we continue, we might wind up with people dressed in admirals' outfits pretending to be women. That could happen.
I am honored to serve as the first female 4-star officer of the U.S. Public Health Service Commissioned Corps.
Now, that person is obviously mentally ill, but so are the rest of us if we accept it as normal. Adam Carolla is an expert on the hilarious and terrifying. He joins us tonight. Adam Carolla, thanks so much for coming out. It does seem like the standards for leadership have been inverted, like the craziest person, the least competent person, the most obviously unqualified person becomes the leader of everybody else.
Well, I mean, think about this. Do a little thought experiment. All the people you just mentioned, and we'll throw in Biden, we'll throw in Kamala Harris as well. Would you hire them to coach your small town high school football team? No. And if the answer is no, if you literally start laughing, right? If you said Feinstein or Fetterman or even Biden or Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, any of these people, if you said, I would like them to coach our high school football team, you would be laughed out of the small town you lived in. So if they cannot raise to that level, then maybe they shouldn't be running the government.
But I think they're running the government because of their deficiencies. So if you just took a cross-section of 10,000 people from the phone book, assuming phone books still exist, which they don't, but it's a cross-section of the population, you would get some high-aptitude people, some low-aptitude people. This is not a representative sample. Like the U.S. Senate, for example, the White House, it's disproportionately stupid and crazy. Like we're selecting bad people on purpose.
Well, it does dovetail nicely into the sort of intersectionality and all the woke stuff and all the affirmative action hires. But could it go any other way? I mean, if your criteria for hiring a football coach was we need the gayest, we need the darkest, we need the ones who cross-dress and transgender, how would that football team's record be at the end of 3 years of playing? I mean, how else could this go?
Well, maybe you've hit upon a solution to the current crisis in our former meritocracy where Congress passes a law forcing the NBA and the NFL to abide by the same hiring standards they're imposing on, say, J.P. Morgan and Citibank and everybody else. Why not do that? And we can all watch what happens when you abandon the meritocracy.
Well, it would be the greatest experiment ever, and I think it would be very informative to a lot of people. I think if you said we're going to do a basketball team that we're going to hire by the same standards that the federal government hires in terms of intersectionality and race and everything else, and then you watched a bunch of guys bounce the ball off of their foreheads and into the first row and score no points, and each game would end in a tie 0-0, then maybe Americans would take a look at the horrible sloppy play on the court and say, we don't want this in our government. The problem is we can't do the math. We're not doing the math. The second Joe Biden said, I'm going to run with a vice president who's female and black and other, people should have been outraged by that. That's an insane statement. It's a racist statement. It's an insulting statement to everyone who's in the country. I told you when I was on your show a couple of years ago, I said Joe Biden is essentially a drunken airline pilot, and we're all in the passenger seats. That's insane, and it seems like an extreme analogy, but is it that much different?
Well, it was actually foreshadowing of what we're seeing in America's airports now with the new near miss every week, thanks to the equity hiring standards now being imposed on the airlines. So you called that early, Adam Carolla. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, Zucker.
So we'll be honest, a lot of problems that government faces actually are kind of complex, or in some cases very complex. It's hard to know what to do. If someone said, fix Social Security, what would you do? It'd be tough to figure that out. But other problems are not complicated. They're pretty easy to solve. And one of them is crime, another is homelessness. So California has more homelessness than any place probably in the world. Gavin Newsom, the governor, spent billions on trying to prevent it, but the problem's gotten worse. California now has 30% of the country's entire homeless population. So that's just a mystery to Gavin Newsom. We spend billions. It's getting worse. How come? What's interesting is to see the alternatives to this lunacy, and one of them is a place called Coronado, California, one of the prettiest cities in the state. Richard Bailey is the mayor of Coronado and joins us tonight with his solution. Mr. Mayor, thank you so much for coming on. I can't remember a more inspiring story. Tell the viewers, if you would, how you solved homelessness in Coronado.
Well, Tucker, there are several factors that have contributed to Coronado's continued success at maintaining a low to zero rate of homeless. And one of those factors is our approach. And our approach starts with a sincere effort to connect any homeless individual with the resources they need to get back on their feet. So anytime there's a homeless individual in town, we have contracted with a third-party shelter provider that can connect them with a roof over their head and the resources they need to improve their life. And I sincerely believe that we have a civic and moral responsibility to help those that actually want to be helped. But we also have a broader responsibility to the larger community to make sure we are maintaining safe and clean public spaces that include making sure that the sidewalks are not blocked, that we don't have people shooting up with drugs and using alcohol in public spaces, that we don't have people urinating and defecating in public. So we also maintain a very consistent and proactive amount of code enforcement. And I think the combination of those two is what has contributed to Coronado's success.
So I think the key to what you just said, and it's something that you never hear anybody say, which is we do, of course, have an obligation to the least among us, and that would include people living on the street addicted to drugs. But we have a twin obligation to everybody else because they live there too. It's their city also. And I don't know why you're the only mayor I have heard in like the last 10 years to say that out loud. Why is that a hard concept?
I wish I knew the answer to that, Tucker, but I have to say this is important for viewers to understand that what is happening here in California is not normal. When you consider that from 2012 through 2022, we actually saw the number of homeless individuals nationwide drop from 620 to about 580,000. So we saw a decrease around the entire nation. Meanwhile, over that same time period, we saw the number of homeless increase by 40% in California. And that is despite us, in the past 3 years alone, spending $10 billion in effort to solve this mess.
Yeah. Thank you for noticing the obvious and acting on it. Mayor Richard Bailey of Coronado, a truly beautiful place. Thank you.
Thank you.
So a lot of people claim the Biden administration doesn't really care about you, but that's untrue. If you're Ukrainian, they care very, very much. And that's why the Attorney General showed up in Kiev today to kiss the ring of his real boss. Former Congressman Dennis Kucinich joins us to explain what is going on here. We'll be right back. So seems like every week another top Democratic Party official heads to the country they care most about, which of course is Ukraine. It's not the United States. They're not pretending anymore. So Nancy Pelosi, Janet Yellen, our Treasury Secretary, Joe Biden, our president, have all gone to Ukraine. Now, for some reason, the Attorney General of, not of Ukraine, of the United States, went to, at public expense, Ukraine today. What was he doing there? Maybe giving Zelensky advice on how to persecute more Christians. Both of them are doing it. We can't say. We can probably assume they were not talking about the bombing of the Nord Stream pipeline, which the Biden administration was deeply involved in. Nobody seems to remember that story. Dennis Kucinich does. He's a former member of Congress from Ohio, a former presidential candidate. He joins us tonight. Congressman, thank you so much for coming on. So the sabotage of this natural gas pipeline from Eastern Europe to Western Europe is the largest act of environmental terrorism in history. It released more carbon into the atmosphere than any man-made act ever. And the Biden administration is responsible for it. Why is no one talking about this?
Well, you're right. It's an unprecedented act in American history. And the people of the United States have a right to know if their government blew up the pipeline. And if you look at the details in Seymour Hersh's investigative piece, there was a plan to destroy the pipeline before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And incriminating statements were made by President Biden, Victoria Nuland, National Security Advisor Sullivan, prior to the pipeline being blown up. And when you think about it, Sullivan's key here because he helped to organize it. Then he tried to blame Russia. And what it was really all about is knocking Russia out of the European natural gas market. And one thing I want you to think about, Tucker, this pipeline attack occurred off Bornholm Island, which is part of Denmark. Denmark signed the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. And Denmark has to investigate this incident, or the ICC will. And the United States Congress has an obligation to investigate. And because if they don't, this is also something could go to the ICC, even if America doesn't recognize the ICC. So no one has heard the end of it. The American people have a right to know. And, you know, Thomas Paine wrote in Common Sense that, you know, we don't have a king in America. In America, the law is king. And we cannot let our historic and constitutional journey just be destroyed by a group in the White House that doesn't want to recognize their responsibility, the United States Constitution. No president has a right to commit an act of war against any other nation unless you go to Congress and get Congress to declare. So there's problems there with the U.S. Constitution, with international law, and this is just beginning. What Seymour Hersh did was he tore open the curtain and gave the American people in the world a chance to look at the machinations behind the scene that really are totally un-American, totally against what our country ought to be standing for, and that the president and the other people who have been involved in this have to be held to account.
The Biden administration did this. That is beyond doubt, as far as I'm concerned. It was an attack not just on this piece of Russian infrastructure, but on our NATO allies in Western Europe that relied on that for their energy needs. So if you're a big NATO supporter, keep NATO together. We just attacked NATO. Why is no one in the media, which is insane, why is no one in the media following up on this?
Well, you know, that's a real question that, fortunately, you know, you, Tucker, have been hammering away at this. And as someone who served in Congress and was responsible for bringing articles of impeachment against a president and a vice president, I understand the Constitution perfectly on this. And there ought to be hearings in Congress. There must be a congressional investigation. Yeah. We cannot permit a president, whatever the party is, to get away with an act of war against another nation. 83 million Germans had their energy supply threatened during the winter. I mean, hello?
Yeah, it's lunacy. But the Uniparty wants to sweep it under the rug. Dennis Kucinich, great to see you tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you can't let the core infrastructure and core services in a country degrade. You just can't let that happen. You can't, for example, let air travel become dangerous. You have to say no. But that's happening in our country. Every other week, there's a near miss at a major airport. So you'd hope the Biden administration would want to make sure that the person running the FAA, which regulates aviation, would be competent and knowledgeable in aviation. But no, in a further insult to this country, the White House has nominated a guy called Phil Washington to lead the FAA. And as we learned at his confirmation hearing, he knows nothing about aviation. Watch this.
So, Mr. Washington, can you quickly tell me what airspace requires an ADS-B transponder? Quickly, please.
Thank you for the question, Senator. Not sure I can answer that question right now.
So what are the 6 types of special use airspace that protect this national security that appear on FAA charts? Quickly, please.
Sorry, Senator, I cannot answer that question.
So what are the operational limitations of a pilot flying under basic med?
Well, thank you for the question, Senator. I'm not a pilot.
So can you tell me what causes an aircraft to spin or to stall?
Again, Senator, I'm not a pilot.
So can you tell me what the minimum separation distance is for landing and departing airliners during the daytime, Mr. Washington?
I don't want to guess on that, Senator.
So, seems like a nice enough guy, but this person is being nominated to run the FAA, which oversees air travel. So why in the world would you nominate a guy who knows nothing about airplanes to run the federal agency that oversees airplanes? Well, because he cares a lot about equity. That's why. Watch.
Do you intend, if you're confirmed, to have this so-called equity czar as a member of your senior staff at the FAA?
Thank you for the question, Senator. I do think that there's a role to play for equity in organizations, so I would definitely look at that.
Okay, so just to be clear, equity is an inherently evil and discriminatory concept. But even if it was a good concept, it would still be irrelevant to running the FAA or the Transportation Department or the White House or any other federal agency that all Americans of all colors pay for. They expect the best person, a knowledgeable, wise person who will do the job efficiently, well, and in the case of the FAA, safely. They said the White House picked a guy who knows nothing about airplanes to run the FAA. Truly nuts. So Andrew Tate is despised in this country by the people who run this country, but he's maybe the most popular person on the entire internet. And maybe because he is so popular, he was arrested several months ago in Romania and remains in prison without being charged with a crime, and apparently despite being very ill. What is going on here? We think we know. We're going to talk to his attorney after the break. Approximately 250 years, everybody in America agreed that sexualizing children is the worst crime you could commit. Child molesters got hurt even in prison. Even criminals don't like child molesters. You can't sexualize kids. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, maybe as a reaction against Trump, who knows? Historians will figure it out. Sexualizing children became a mandate on the left. You have to sexualize children. It's the law, and taxpayers have to pay for it. This is true across the West, particularly here in the U.S., but also in Canada. And a lot of it, for some reason, is occurring in school libraries. Knox Zajac is an 11-year-old who lives in the state of Maine. He's in the 6th grade. He just spoke up at a school board meeting to read aloud from the book Nick and Charlie. He checked it out of his school's library. Watch.
I was a 6th grader. I was in the library, and this book was on a stand. I'd like to read you a page. My back over my hips as I asked if we should take our clothes off. And he's saying yes before I finish my sentence. He's pulling off my t-shirt, laughing when I can't undo his shirt buttons. He's undoing my belt. I'm reaching into his bedside drawer for a condom. We're kissing. Again, we're rolling over. Obviously, you can see where this is going. I don't know if it's because we're feeling especially emotional or just tired, or these past couple of weeks have been too much. But this reminds me so much of the first time we had sex. We were both terrified, and the whole thing was kind of terrible because we didn't know what we were doing. But it was good too, so good.
Well, it's a little kid, really. But the librarian didn't care. The librarian asked if Knox wanted to check out a graphic novel version of that book. Some pictures, too. Knox Zajac and his father, Adam, join us tonight. Knox, Adam, thank you so much for coming on. Let me just commend you on your bravery. Knox, first to you, what did you think when the librarian asked you if you wanted to see the picture version of that book?
The only thing that went through my head was I was so uncomfortable, and I was just like so angry. I don't know, I didn't believe it was actually happening.
Yeah, kids know when something's creepy, like you can feel immediately. Adam, parents know too, but so many of them are intimidated from saying anything because it's unfashionable. You're supposed to just, you don't want to be the uncool parent. Why did you decide to bring this to public attention?
It was something that had to be done. I had heard about another book that was in the high school, and I asked my son to get a hold of it. I didn't even think anything of my middle school son, and when I got the one that was in the high school, it was disturbing to say the least what I found in there, and it's just really, really, really disappointing to find out how our education system is failing our kids.
Yeah. How did your neighbors and the other parents in your town respond when you raised a fuss over this?
You know, at first, a lot of people just didn't have an idea that it was going on in our communities. But now that they've actually seen it, and seeing an 11-year-old speak about that at the school board meeting has really set the stage and place this right in the laps of all the parents across the country now. It's really amazing the support that we've gotten through the community, and now honestly across the country. I get messages privately still, hundreds of them a day, just saying thank you for speaking up, and you know, they're worried about the cancel culture. They're getting canceled, or they're getting disciplined by their bosses, or they're losing businesses as owners, and it's not worth it. They're terrified to speak up.
Yep, they certainly are. But you two aren't, and we appreciate your bravery. Knox, for 11, you're just amazingly self-contained. It's so impressive. Thank you both.
Of course.
Thank you, Tucker. I really appreciate you having us on.
Well, I do. So we talk a lot about climate, but how's the actual environment doing? The soil and the air and the water. Well, whales and dolphins are washing up dead in the Northeast, apparently because of wind farm construction. And now there is unfolding what may be the biggest environmental disaster of all. It's called red tide. It's covering 100 square miles tonight in the Gulf of Mexico. So red tide occurs when colonies of algae grow out of control. Toxins in red tide kill fish in huge numbers. Red tide also makes it hard for people to breathe. But it's also true that red tide may cause ALS, Lou Gehrig's. So this is a huge problem that is widely ignored for some reason. Paul Allen Cox is an ethnobotanist. He's the documentarian who did Toxic Puzzle, and we're happy to have him join us tonight. Thank you so much for coming on. So you did this amazing documentary, terrifying documentary on red tide, and yet I think most people aren't aware of what a threat it is. Tell us, if you would, what red tide does to people, potentially.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Carlson. There's been red tides along the west coast of Florida for, a century and a half. They're not unusual. Yes. And they produce various neurotoxins that people detect by getting stinging in the eyes and sometimes respiratory distress. Sometimes they poison shellfish. We've looked at other types of harmful algal blooms called cyanobacteria and found they have a toxin that not only causes cancer, but also can cause ALS. And that's something that we're monitoring very closely with the outflows from Lake Okeechobee in Florida.
I mean, I think there's a consensus that ALS has got to be the scariest, or certainly one of the scariest diseases that people get. So anything that might cause it, it seemed would set off like alarm bells, and people would be completely freaked out about it. I don't get the sense that the response to this is very urgent.
Well, fortunately, ALS is a very rare disease, but we found that a toxin called BMAA increases your risk of getting ALS. Our colleagues, Dr. Elijah Stommel at Dartmouth University Neurology Department, our colleagues in Florida, have found that if you're near these cyanobacterial blooms, that your risk goes up. So this is completely avoidable. People should just stay away from these cyanobacterial tides. If they have asthma or serious neurological conditions, just stay indoors and stay away till it's clear. And I think there's a real strong consensus of scientists that this is a problem we can actually solve just by cleaning up the water a little bit. I think it'll really go a long ways.
Cleaning up the water. It's just nice to hear somebody to say that out loud, because you rarely do at this point for some reason. We appreciate your coming on. Dr. Paul Alan Cox, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, as we told you, a man called Andrew Tate, who we've interviewed on this show, probably the most popular person on the internet globally, has been rotting for months in a Romanian prison, apparently despite being sick with what could be cancer. He has not been charged with a crime. What's going on? Oh, you know what's going on. We're going to talk to his attorney straight ahead. Andrew Tate became the single most popular person on the internet globally by talking about masculinity, the personal responsibility men have, etc., etc. He also became really hated on the left for some reason. Back in December, Romanian authorities threw Tate and his brother in jail, where they remain, despite in Tate's case being very sick. They still have not charged him with anything. Tate is under investigation for human trafficking. Joe Biden's State Department may or may not have had a hand in this, but they're thrilled by it in any case. So what's going on, and how long is this going to continue? Isn't it a human rights violation? Looks like one. Tina Glandian is Andrew Tate's lawyer. She's a partner at Garagos and Garagos. We talked to her a few nights ago. Here's what she said. What are the charges? How can he be in jail if he hasn't been charged for months?
Hi, Tucker. Thanks for having me. So in Romania, the procedure is a little different than what we're used to here in the United States. There, they have a procedure called preventative arrest, which is what they've essentially arrested the Tate brothers and 2 women for. And they arrested them at the end of December. And initially, it was a 24-hour arrest. And then the prosecution made an application for a 30-day extension, which was granted. And last month, they sought a further 30-day extension, which was granted, and most recently, that was extended again until the end of March. And they have up to 180 days in which they could extend this detention without formally charging them with any crimes. So it's an ongoing criminal investigation, but they are detained.
They're rotting in a Romanian jail, and we can only imagine what a Romanian jail is like. This is the definition of a human rights violation. He's a media figure, and he's rotting in a jail without charges. Have civilized Western governments said anything about this?
Unfortunately, this is now just being handled under Romanian law, and nobody else has really weighed in as far as other governments. This is sanctioned under their laws. It's the procedure is proper kind of under their law. However, I think the way it's being applied in this case is completely a violation of international human rights law. And this investigation didn't start in December when they were arrested. This investigation actually started back in April when there were false accusations made. The police raided their residence and they realized that the accusations were false. They did not arrest anybody. They did not charge anybody. And at that point, actually, the brothers filed criminal complaints against the 2 women who had falsely accused them. And many people have not heard about those criminal complaints, but those are active and they're open as another investigation in Romania right now.
I hope henceforth you use air quotes around the phrase Romanian law, if you would. So months in a Romanian jail, Andrew Tate was quite a spirited figure, by some counts the most popular person on the entire internet as a result. Obviously, the point is to break his spirit. Have they done that?
Absolutely not. Both Tate brothers are of strong mind and strong spirit, and they are doing the best they can under the circumstances. I think they're holding up as well as anybody could. They're praying, they're meditating, they are receiving a lot of letters of support from family, friends, and all of their other fans around the world, and that's keeping them busy. The only thing is they are extremely frustrated, obviously. They want to prove their innocence. They want to return home. They want to tell the world what is going on. But right now, unfortunately, because there is an ongoing criminal investigation, we aren't allowed to actually discuss all of the evidence that is very favorable that shows that they didn't commit any crimes in this case.
Pretty obviously a setup, Tina. I mean, let's stop lying. These guys were super unpopular with the people in charge, and now they're in a Romanian jail under, quote, Romanian law. Like, obviously, no?
I think you said it yourself, Tucker.
Yeah, I did. Because, like, let's stop pretending. Let's stop playing. That's exactly what this is. I appreciate the update.
Sure. I was going to say it's frustrating to be on the defense right now, unable to respond to all of the one-sided leaks that have come out when we have exculpatory evidence, but we're not able at this point to discuss it yet and to put it out for the world to see and for the brothers to start to get the truth out and to clear their names.
Yeah, because we know for a fact they tried to set him up for sexual assault before. The woman who was supposedly assaulting came out and said, what? No, that's my boyfriend. Right, so there's a lot of lying here, a lot, and everyone in our country seems to be believing it, but we don't. So appreciate the update. Tina, thank you.
Of course.
You may recall the documentary called Supersized Me. It was about eating McDonald's full-time. It inspired one man in Nashville called Kevin McGinnis. He's hoping the McDonald's diet will super downsize his body. He's eating only McDonald's for 100 days to lose weight, and he reports back it's, quote, absolutely working. Kevin McGinnis blogs about his diet. He's a brave man. He joins us now. Kevin, thanks so much for coming on. So I'm not saying I don't believe you. By the way, you look fit and vigorous, I will say, in a non-creepy way. But how are you keeping...
Because you can't see my belly, so...
How are you keeping fit on McDonald's? What are you doing?
So literally the concept, I was a boxer, I wrestled in school, and you have to cut. You have to cut to make weight. So cutting the calories, cutting the food in half. If I ate 3 meals a day, I cut them in half. And I seek the heat before I eat, meaning I wait until that heat in your stomach that says you're hungry. Everyone else calls it hunger. I call it my incinerator turning on to get rid of all the excess and also burn off some of the fat off my body, and then I'll have that next meal. No eating hours, no counting, no measuring. Just cut the meals in half, eat 3 of them a day when you're hungry. And my belief is we'll be 50 pounds down by the end of the 100 days, better blood work and better health. If you don't believe me, follow along. Let's find out.
That's just unbelievable. So really the essential ingredient is self-control. You're approaching McDonald's in the way that I never have, which is with restraint. So like how do you handle breakfast?
Yeah, well, so breakfast is go to the McDonald's, order any breakfast menu item, so order the meal, including a dessert, right, if you want to have the pastry, whatever. But then cutting it in half, and at first, for the first 3 or 4 days, wrap up the other half, get it out of sight, out of mind, and just eat the half, and then save the other half till later. Eat that for lunch, or save it for the next day's breakfast, whatever. And then just eat, again, each meal, only half of whatever that whole meal would be at McDonald's. Cut it in half, save the other half. After you've done it for about 3 or 4 days, your stomach will have shrunk a little bit, and then you can just eat the half, and you can wrap up the other half after you've eaten half of it. Either way is fine.
2 questions. Are you worried this will kill you, is the obvious one. And second, how does McDonald's leftovers taste the next day?
So on the leftovers, I'll answer that one first. Definitely putting the sandwich in the microwave with a little cup of water so it actually steams it a little bit. Really good for the sandwiches. For me, I like the softer. You can put the whole thing in an air fryer. For the fries and hash browns, either air fryer or a dry skillet, and it turns them right back to almost brand new again. So they're really good. As far as is it going to kill me? Did the blood work at the beginning. We'll do blood work throughout. My belief is that it's going to absolutely improve the blood work throughout the whole process, because by waiting... Go ahead.
No, that's it. You're a wrestler. Obviously, you're an Iron Man, a brave man, too. Kevin McGinnis, thank you for joining us. We'll be right back.